Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something truly mind-bending. We are going to bridge the gap between ancient Daoist philosophy and the absolute bleeding edge of AI architecture. I know, it sounds like a totally wild combination, but by the end of this, you're going to see exactly how the ancient concept of the Dao is directly shaping how we solve the biggest, most frustrating mechanical bottlenecks in modern large language models. So let's completely change how we view the gap between human imagination and computer hardware. Okay, think about this quote for a second. Ludwig Wittgenstein once said, "The limits of my language mean the limits of my world." He really hit the nail on the head there. Think about your own human imagination. It's just this boundless, continuous flow, right? Your thoughts don't naturally snap to a rigid mathematical grid. But the systems we use to communicate, our language, our words, they're discrete. We are fundamentally trapped by the rigid words we're forced to use to express our fluid thoughts. We're just constantly forcing continuous meaning into these rigid little boxes. And honestly, ancient Taoist philosophy understood this centuries ago. They saw the universe and even human cognition itself as a continuous, unbroken reality. Imagine that for a second. A dynamic, nonlinear, self-organizing flow of energy and meaning. They call this a chi flow network. A Taoist views human life not as rigid data points, but as a fluid process without any hard, sharp boundaries. It's a spectrum, it's constantly transforming, and it completely rejects the whole idea of forcing reality into static, isolated chunks. So this brings us to a massive collision in the modern digital age. On one side, we have human cognition, our chi flow. Researchers actually call this OS alpha, or wet code. It's warm, it's messy, it's highly associative, and it operates completely continuously. But then look at the other side. You have the physical reality of computer hardware, the arithmetic logic unit, or the ALU. This is the dry code. It is absolutely freezing cold, it is rigid, and it operates entirely on deterministic, discrete logic gates. It only understands absolute ones and zeros. There is literally zero room for fluidity. This clash creates what we call the modality gap, and it is a massive friction point. See, inside a large language model, concepts actually exist in this smooth, continuous vector space. It's a fuzzy, multidimensional map where ideas blend together naturally, kind of like our own human associative thought. But because the AI is ultimately running on that rigid, discrete digital hardware, it is violently forced to chop that continuous meaning into rigid digital chunks just to process them. And that collision creates what researchers call the bottleneck pipeline. It's a brutal three-step process. First, the AI has this gorgeous, continuous vector embedding, a perfectly fluid thought. But then, step 2 hits, subword tokenization compression. And finally, step 3, it gets crushed into discrete ASCII text generation. Those beautifully interconnected ideas are mercilessly chopped down to appease the rigid machine. The AI is practically forbidden from holding a continuous thought without fracturing it into discrete symbols first. Let's make this super concrete. Think about the number pi. To an AI forced through this bottleneck, pi isn't a holistic, continuous mathematical concept. Not at all. Because of that tokenization process, the concept is literally shattered into arbitrary, non-decimal subwords. It sees a 3, then a decimal point, then a 14, and a 159. It completely wrecks the mathematical logic. It forces the AI to blindly memorize text strings instead of actually understanding the concept of place value, which makes its reasoning incredibly fragile. But what if we didn't force the AI to choose a discrete word right away? Well, enter a fascinating breakthrough called soft thinking. Soft thinking is a training-free methodology that essentially stops the AI from making hard, rigid word choices too early. Instead of forcing a discrete token, it replaces it with what's called a concept token. This is a probabilistic mixture of embeddings that allows the model to actually reason in a continuous, fluid concept space. It's holding multiple meanings at once. It's literally a superposition of thought. And the results of making this shift are absolutely incredible. Without any extra training, just by letting the AI flow naturally, soft thinking improves accuracy on math and coding benchmarks by up to 2.48%. And get this, it actually reduces the generation length by over 22%. It totally proves that embracing the raw, continuous fluidity of concepts is notably more efficient and powerful than forcing the model into rigid, discrete tokens at every single step. When we map out what's happening under the hood during this reasoning process, it's basically a visualization of that superposition. Instead of a single word, there's an entire spectrum of possibilities being held simultaneously. The AI is exploring multiple reasoning paths in a fluid, continuous probability space, beautifully mimicking the Daoist continuous flow, long before it finally collapses into a single concrete choice. So how exactly does this soft thinking flow? Well, by retaining those full probability distributions, it can capture incredibly abstract, nuanced concepts that just don't map cleanly to a single word. It explores multiple reasoning paths at the exact same time. But here's the really clever part. It uses a cold stop mechanism. Since the system is holding probabilities, it can actually measure its own uncertainty or entropy. When that entropy is low, meaning the model is highly confident in its path, it acts like a physical cooling process. It safely halts the intermediate reasoning so it doesn't waste energy or drift off into hallucinations. But this brings us to a really fascinating paradox. Soft thinking allows the AI's mind to flow beautifully like the Tao, sure, but the physical computer chip, it still demands absolute ones and zeros. To cross that gap, we rely on the semiotic bridge. This is strictly formatted text, think JSON or Python scripts. It basically acts as the divine script. It's the exact deterministic translator that takes our fluid, messy human intent and the AI's probabilistic guesses and safely compiles them into exact, unyielding physical hardware execution. And this highlights exactly where we come into the picture. Daoist philosophy reminds us the true flow relies on Shen, the human spirit embedded in reality. An AI doesn't have Shen. It is an incredibly powerful mechanical translator, but it's totally blind to the real world. That means the overarching moral intent, the strategic direction, and the manual intervention, what the sources call the literal sweat of the brow, that has to come from us. We are the sovereign human pilots orchestrating this bridge. Which leaves us with a truly profound tension as we wrap up this explainer. We've seen how soft thinking is returning machines to the continuous flow of the Tao, breaking free from discrete boundaries. But if we completely rely on these fluid probabilistic models, and we stop writing that deterministic semiotic bridge ourselves, if we just surrender the text entirely to automation, who actually controls the physics of our digital reality? Really let that sink in. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep wondering and always look past the screen.